Okay, hello everybody. Thank you for having me. My clicker isn't working again. Hang on. Hang on. Okay. I have to do this differently because apparently my clicker is leaving me hanging again. Okay. Okay. Anyway, my name is Sophie. I'm from Bonn in Germany. I work at a company called cronn as a tester, and recently I've been dabbling in dev work. Before that, I studied math at university. My pronouns are she and her, and you can get in touch on Xing, on LinkedIn, or on Twitter if you like. Here's my handle, and it will be on every slide so you don't forget. Let me preface what I'm going to say with a quick content note. I'm going to talk about mental illness, including but not limited to depression, anxiety, and eating disorder. There will be mention of verbal harassment, physical illness, in particular cancer, and the COVID-19 pandemic. I know we're all tired of it, but I have to. And sadly, the war in Ukraine. But I'm going to dive straight in because I'm pressed for time. Okay. This is me when I was 22 years old. I look quite happy in this picture, right? Healthy and relaxed, but that's far from the truth. I didn't really know what was happening to me. I just knew it felt completely and utterly wrong. Uni wasn't going well. My then boyfriend and I were fighting incessantly, and I didn't even want to do that, but I was pulling away from all of my friends. I alternated between feeling sad and scared and overwhelmed and lonely, and then again feeling nothing at all for days on end, and that in turn scared me senseless. The predominant emotion was a sense of wrongness, of I don't want this, I can't do this, and I didn't even know what this ominous this might be. I decided I had to do something, and the thing I decided to do was to lose weight. Clever, right? Perfectionist young woman feels out of control of her life, controls body instead. Such a textbook case. Half a year later, I had lost more than 10 kilograms of body weight, around 75 kilograms of boyfriend, and pretty much all perspective. Now, 10 kilograms doesn't sound all that much, but on an already slender frame like that, it pushed me well over the edge of unhealthily underweight and made me look like I had created a few too many Horcruxes. You might be wondering why I'm showing you the before picture and not one of the later ones, something drastic to make a point. The reason is that for people with an eating disorder or body image issues, looking at pictures of extremely skinny people can be triggering, and I don't want to trigger anyone, even if it's only me. When I finally admitted to myself that I was sick and needed help and went to see a doctor, I was diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and eating disorder, and I spent the next few years on antidepressants and in therapy. I don't want to dwell much on how I got sick or how I got better. That part is fairly straightforward anyway. Pharmaceuticals helped, and therapy and working on myself helped more. To get to the heart of what I want to talk about today, we have to fast forward a bit. I was finally done with uni, but it had taken a few more detours and a lot longer than it should have. So my CV looked bad, and I didn't want to explain the reasons why in a cover letter. That's just not something you do, right? So I was afraid I was essentially non-hireable. Until one day, I went on an interview which seemed to go reasonably well until the inevitable question about all the lost time came up. The interviewer, my now boss, obviously wasn't buying my evasive answers, and he called me back the next day asking again what went wrong. So I admitted to the eating disorder part of that, but not to the rest, hoping that that would be just enough to explain the gaps, but not so bad that he'd think I'd relapse under the slightest bit of pressure. And it worked. He hired me, and I was really happy there. To this day, I still am really happy there. But in the beginning, I was constantly worried that I'd slip up and someone might find out my deep, dark secret. You see, not long after my diagnosis, when there were finally words for this blur of feeling miserable and the initial shame of not functioning had worn off, I had started talking rather openly about mental health or lack thereof with friends and family, and to be honest, the occasional stranger at parties. I had decided that I wasn't going to be shamed anymore, because it's bad enough to have to deal with the monsters in your head without feeding them guilt and shame, and they eat that. But at work, I didn't dare talk about it. You simply don't talk about that at work, I thought. I didn't want to be seen as weak or vulnerable or unable to withstand stress, least of all by my boss. So I went concealed and few through my work days. Then one day, some of my colleagues and I went to a conference together for the first time, specifically the Agile testing days. I don't know what exactly I expected, but certainly not this. People there talked about mental health in a professional environment, at a tech conference no less. I was stunned. There was a talk about burnout, which I really enjoyed, and afterwards I asked the speaker how he had explained his absences to his boss. And he simply answered, the truth. That got me thinking. You know, commitment, focus, respect, courage, and openness, we probably all know the Agile values by heart. But did I really take them to heart? Trying to hide my own history certainly didn't feel courageous or open to me. And couldn't I trust my boss and my new colleagues to still respect me if they knew the truth? As it so happened, I had a performance review coming up on the very first day back at the office after the conference. I was badly sleep deprived, still in sensory overload mode, so I was talking way too much and way too fast. But I was determined, and I started the review by telling my boss the whole truth about my mental illness. I think I overran him a little there with my whole truth talk thing. But he was gracious enough to thank me for my honesty, and he didn't even fire me for being a wimp. And from that moment on, I didn't hold back anymore. When the topic of mental health came up, I talk about it with anyone, simply enough. And today, I'd like to share with you 10 lessons I have learned from breaking the taboo and speaking about mental illness. The first one is probably quite obvious, but it wasn't to me, so I'm going to reiterate it here. The first one is, you are never the only one. When you mention illness or therapy in any group of people, there's often enough someone who responds with their experiences. And I think that's a simple matter of statistics, because according to one report I found, the State of Health in the EU report of 2018, in the course of that year, 17% of the population had a mental health problem. That's more than 1 in 6. So it shouldn't have come as a surprise that as soon as I started talking about mental health issues with my colleagues, I learned I wasn't the only one who had been through hard times or who had a loved one who had. It shouldn't have come as a surprise, but it had. You can almost never tell from looking at people or from day-to-day chit-chat in the office kitchen while you wait for your coffee to brew. If people didn't tell you, their battles are mostly invisible. I remember feeling completely isolated when I first got my diagnosis. My disease made me feel so different from other people, like a total freak show. Everybody else was dealing with life, the universe, and everything. Why wasn't I? But then I found out that other people, normal people, have had the same thing, have struggled, and have gotten better. And that revelation comforted me a lot. This is already one of the main reasons I talk about mental illness. Maybe if I speak up, I myself make somebody else feel less alone, and I think that's worth it. The second lesson is openness inspires openness. One day, a coworker approached me. He said that there was something that he had kept to himself for years, and he didn't even want to keep it secret anymore, but he didn't know how to start talking about it. But, he said, with my openness, he felt safe to confide his story in me. And a short while later, he told some of our other colleagues, and now it's no longer a secret. We had another chat the other day. I said something along the lines of, I'm sorry, I'm oversharing again. But if I don't mention the taboo stories, none of my other stories make real sense. To which he replied, yeah, I know what you mean. Before I started talking about the bad stuff, I simply didn't talk altogether. And it's true, taboos and secrets can take up so much of your headspace that they seem to overshadow everything. In my experience, if you bring them out into the open, they lose some of their power over you, and that gives you more room to be you. Having helped someone become more comfortable with talking about themselves taught me a beautiful thing. Sharing your secrets, even the bad ones, even the taboo ones, can turn them into a gift, into a token of safety and understanding. It says, I share a piece of me, so you can share a piece of you. Lesson 3 is openness is a habit, not a character trait. Another change I noticed, maybe the mirror image of the last lesson, was within myself. Anxiety makes it hard to voice your opinions, especially if you have to contradict someone. In an agile team, however, you have to be able to say, hey, I think we're going wrong here, or I think we should do this differently, because courage and openness and shared responsibility and all of that. I used to think that being able to speak your mind freely and openly was a character trait that you either have or you don't, and I was one of the unlucky people who just didn't. But I realized that it becomes easier with practice. Once I had shared something so very personal, expressing my opinions about day-to-day business didn't seem so overwhelming anymore. So over time, I became more and more comfortable with being open. I won't pretend that it's now always easy, because it isn't. But I have learned that openness, much like confidence, is like a muscle that can be exercised. When you start, it's hard and your muscles get sore. But the next time you try, it feels a little easier, and maybe the ache afterwards isn't just as bad. So it gets easier and easier because you get stronger and stronger. Strength brings me to the 4th lesson, showing vulnerability shows strength. You know, being a sensitive person plus depression plus anxiety means that I have never had a thick skin. Grievances have always gone straight to the bone. So when I was a kid, I was called a wimp and a crybaby a lot, which I obviously hated. So naturally, I always worried about conflicts at work. But conflicts do happen even in the most harmonious of teams. One day, for example, I had a stupid misunderstanding with a teammate during our daily stand-up. I didn't say anything at that moment and told myself he probably didn't mean what I thought he had said, but it kept hurting and I kept obsessing about it for hours. Old me would have probably just let it ruin my day and leave a dent in my confidence while putting on a happy face. But new and improved, open and talkative me didn't want to do that. So I told him I was bothered by what he had said and why. Look at me standing my ground and making I statements. We did the adult thing then. We talked the problem through, sorted out the misunderstanding, and have a much improved communication ever since. Admitting I was hurt hadn't made me weak in his eyes. On the contrary, he appreciated me facing the issue, he said, and thanked me for making him aware of it. So why do we generally think of people who struggle with things as weak? We all have our vulnerabilities, our trigger points, and healthy conflict resolution is really, really hard for everyone. Imagine doing that with a chemical imbalance in your brain. It takes a lot of strength, and by admitting I was hurt, I had proven I have that strength. I'm not going to lie, not all lessons I learned are good lessons. The 5th one is some people just don't get it. Okay, let me ask you something. Have you ever had something like a broken leg and had somebody tell you, have you tried like not having a broken leg? I don't think so, right? Because that would be stupid. You can't just think your leg unbroken somehow. Your body needs time to heal. And then sometimes time doesn't do the trick. That's why we have doctors and medicine and plaster casts and surgery and radiation and bandages. And there's no shame in that at all. But when it comes to mental illness, some people don't apply the same logic. If it's your head that's sick, it's all in your head, right? Yes, exactly, it's in my head. That's the entire problem. My head is where I keep my thoughts and my feelings. I don't want it to be in there with them. Some people just don't understand, so they give really unhelpful advice. So I've been told to look on the right side, to count my blessings, and to just stay positive more times than I can count. But that's not how it works. You can't just stop being sick and be awesome instead. And this lack of understanding for mental illness is more than just an annoyance, it's dangerous. Because when you are constantly told that the thing you're fighting with is not a real disease, you might not go see a doctor and you might not take your medicine, but it is a real disease and it's potentially fatal. So don't laugh it off, don't shrug it off, and don't make people feel bad about taking pills that could be saving their lives. So how do you deal with these people? Do you try to ignore them or do you try to educate them? I don't know. I just know what I do. I personally have over time accepted that some people just don't get it. And that has meant the end of more than one friendship. That doesn't mean I've stopped caring, however. Not caring is not exactly an easy thing to do if caring too much is part of your diagnosis. So I still try. I try to explain to people what it's like, and I try to let it go when that is fruitless. And sometimes, sadly, it's really, really fruitless. Lesson 6 is some people get it really, really badly wrong. Here's where things get weird. As you can see, I talk quite openly about very personal things, and sometimes this openness gets misconstrued as either being flirty or as a desperate cry for attention, specifically male attention. I don't see how you can understand my brain doesn't produce enough of the happy chemicals as an invitation, but it has happened, and sadly more than once. Let me stress that the following episode isn't something that happened at work. None of my co-workers would do such a thing, and I'm positive the company wouldn't stand for it. It was at a party where I found myself in a discussion with a guy about openness. And when I was done rambling, he said, "You know, Sophie, I really do like your openness. And while we're all being so open here, here's what I like in bed. And oh, by the way, I've been thinking about doing that to you the entire time you were talking." Not cool, dude. Don't get me wrong, I don't mean any kink shaming. He can be into whatever the hell he wants. But in this situation, it to me felt like he was verbally waving his genitals in my face. Maybe this guy didn't even mean any harm by it. Maybe by some twisted logic, he honestly thought he was cheering me up by complimenting me or something. But maybe, and I think that's the more likely explanation, he tried to exploit my perceived weakness, my confidence issues. And that's appalling because it's predatory behavior and I am not easy prey. Thankfully, I haven't had many of these encounters, so let's not give this guy more room than he deserves and get back to the happier lessons. The 7th one is people want to help you. Let them. Story time. The first time I was planning to fly somewhere on the job, I had a problem because I have a phobia of flying and it's bad, like really bad. There's crying and yelping and hyperventilating involved. I completely lose my cool. I obviously didn't want to embarrass myself in front of my colleagues, but I knew it was going to happen and I knew there was nothing I could do about it. So to get ahead of the embarrassment, I tried to do the whole self-deprecating humor to diffuse difficult situations thing. And I told one of them, just so you know, I said, I'm going to go completely unruly passenger up there. But she didn't laugh. She didn't tease. She didn't find it embarrassing. She said, what can I do to help? So I told her that the things that keep me calm during a flight, or let's be real here, calmish during a flight, like distracting me and reminding me how to breathe in case I forget. And that's what she did during the entire flight. And not only that, there were 6 of us on that plane and none of them rolled their eyes at me or laughed. They all helped, they all chipped in, keeping my mind off the fact that we were trapped in a metal box that has no business being that high up in the air. My fear of being laughed at for my silly phobia made me forget one very important thing, something that's easily forgotten, especially in times like these, but I really think it's true. Most humans are kind, and they will want to help you if you let them. And it's no wonder. Helping others is very rewarding, am I right? We all know the warm, fuzzy glow it gives us in our tummies. Psychological research even suggests that helping others boosts your own well-being and lowers depression. I know asking for help and accepting help can be hard, I know. But look at it this way. If you do ask for help and get the help, you get the help you need, and the person who helps you gets the endorphins. It's a win-win situation, actually. And if you're still not convinced, still think people will like you less for being a burden, consider the following. A person who has helped another person before will be more likely to help them again than if they had been the ones who had been helped. Because cognitive dissonance tricks them into thinking that if they have helped you, they must obviously like you, and then they do. It's called the Ben Franklin effect, and I'm pretty sure it's the reason why people who bum cigarettes at parties make friends the easiest. Speaking of friends, lesson 8 is their strength in numbers. People who struggle with mental illnesses become masters at coping mechanisms ranging from breathing exercises to mindfulness journaling up to stress buying sequin dresses online. That's what I do, by the way. I know it might not feel like you're good at coping or good at anything at all for that matter if you're like me, but trust me, you're fighting an uphill battle against an enemy that likes to fight dirty. And so far, you've made it through every single day of that battle. You are fantastic at coping mechanisms. But I know there are days when none of them seem to work. And there are days when you are sick and tired of even fighting because, God damn it, you don't want to be coping anymore. You want it to be easy, just for once, please. But at least you don't have to do it all on your own. Once you start speaking, like I mentioned, you find others who struggle with the same stuff. Sometimes it even feels like people with mental illnesses flock together even before they know they have that in common. Everybody is fighting their own battles, yes, but that does not mean you cannot help each other out. I now have friends and colleagues with whom I can have combos that go like this. I say, hey, do you have a headspace for me to whine about something? And then they answer, yeah, sure, what do you need? Do you need to vent or do you need advice? And then they say, respectively, deep breath, let me rephrase that thought for you. Or they say, tell me 5 things you can smell now. Or if that's what I need, they say, I'll be your void to scream into them. They can share concrete coping mechanisms with me in times of need, and I can share mine with them. We have each other's swords and bows and axes, and isn't that something? Okay, the next lesson is a bit painful for me, but I think we're going to get through it together. So lesson 9, bluntness uncomplicates things. When I first conceived of this talk, first wrote the proposal for the very first conference, that was back in early 2020, maybe January, February, I was going to say it's been years since I needed therapy or meds and I've been doing just fine. Oh, my sweet summer child. Maybe I jinxed it because since then a lot has happened. First, obviously, there was the pandemic. I would have struggled with that and social distancing alone, staying at home all the time, not meeting friends and family, and always being in sweatpants reminded me an awful lot of my most depressed days. It would have been enough to topple me. But it got worse for me when in April 2020, just when the first wave was finally beginning to ebb down, and after week of doctor's appointment after doctor's appointment, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I won't go into the details about how much going through cancer treatment during a global health crisis in a hospital on lockdown just sucks. Suffice it to say, it sucks quite a lot. And I'm back in therapy. If I had never opened up about having struggled with my mental health before, would I be able to say that now? Or would I try to hide it and make up different reasons why I leave the office every time I go to therapy, once a week? Really? Or would I trust in the fact that under the circumstances, everybody would understand this time? I really don't know what I would have done, but I'm happy I don't even have to think about it. Because the Band-Aid is ripped off and now it's just that, it's off. I don't have to worry about being found out anymore. When I go to therapy, I can now simply say, goodbye team, I'll be AFK for the next hour or so. I'm going to get my head shrunk. Toodaloo, and leave. And that makes my life a whole lot easier right now. Okay, last lesson is everybody should know the oxygen mask rule. Now that I talk this openly about mental health, sometimes people ask me, what is the most helpful thing you learned in therapy? And I always tell them about the oxygen mask rule. It started during one memorable session at therapy where my shrink suggested that maybe I needed to stop thinking about how to make others happy and put my own happiness first for once. And she did have a point there. I was constantly worried about making my parents proud, being a good friend, a good sister, a great girlfriend. And I never thought about how I was treating myself. Now that she made me aware of it, and now that I was thinking about it, I was rather mean to myself. I was constantly nagging, calling myself names. I was starving myself and not taking care of my emotional well-being at all. I thought that as long as I was nice to others, that was okay. I even fancied myself kind of selfless. But as my shrink suggested, taking care of yourself is not only not selfish, it's part of your job as a fully functioning adult. It's like brushing your teeth. I say this fully aware of how hard self-care can be and how even brushing your teeth can seem like a horribly exhausting task. But as with your teeth, making an effort is worth it. Because if you don't make an effort with your mental health, you will have to make an effort with your mental illness. And if you don't take care of yourself, somebody else has to. It's like what they tell you on a plane. In case of emergency, put on your own oxygen mask first, and then you can assist others. Because you are no use to anyone lying passed out on the floor. It's not selfishness, it's purely logical. I think this particular session helped me a lot. It completely reframed self-care and being kind to myself in my mind. It's still hard sometimes, and I can be incredibly stupid when it comes to acting on that rule. But I don't think of self-care any longer as a frivolity that I shouldn't allow myself to indulge in. It's a necessity. And I know it's not only us with the diagnosis who need the reminder to be nice to themselves sometimes. And with everything going on in the world right now, maybe somebody else, maybe in this round, maybe today needs to hear this. In times of crisis, and by the way, on any normal day too, being kind is essential. Being kind to each other, yes, but never forgetting being kind to yourself. Give yourself air to breathe. Okay, now we've made it through all 10 lessons. And now that I've told you all of this, I'd like to tell you why I'm telling you all this. I think it's about time we all get used to talking about mental health. The numbers of people who suffer from depression and other mental health issues have been high for years, even before the dumpster fire that is 2020 has happened and everything that happened afterwards, and now the war in Ukraine. These are horrible, stressful times we live in, and they are taking their toll. Not many of us will come out of this with their psyche unscathed. Some will need psychological help, but not everybody will be able to get it. Some will be too ashamed. Some will not even see the symptoms as symptoms. So knowing the warning signs, knowing what you can do to look after your own mental health and where and how you can get professional help if you need it is more important than ever. Thankfully, mental health-related topics are discussed much more openly than they used to, say, 30 years ago. But studies show that the way we talk about them is still influenced by taboos and stigma and stereotype. It is often seen as something dark, shameful, sometimes even evil. It's something that's used and abused to explain away lone wolf shooters and warmongering oligarchs. You know how they say, he's not a terrorist, he's mentally ill. And I am sick of that, because the vast majority of people who suffer from mental health issues are normal people, people like you and obviously me. Odds are you all know somebody who does, but maybe you don't even know that they do. Because how often does anyone say, I'm sorry I haven't called, I've been too depressed and too anxious, but I'm a bit better now, so want to have coffee? So the image of mental illness is badly distorted. I realize not everyone will want to talk about their mental disorders, especially in the workplace, and nobody should have to if you don't want to. But for me, it was the right decision. I was lucky enough to have been met with a lot of kindness, understanding, and support. And if there was something like a depression fairy godmother, I'd wish for everybody to be safe enough to speak about it if they want to. But there isn't. So we all, you and me, have to do something about it. Making the realities of a once invisible, hushed up disease more visible and understandable is the first step to do that. And we do that by having an open, unprejudiced conversation about it. So let's normalize talking about mental health. Thank you for your kind attention. I won't even try to pronounce that, but maybe you can teach me. Anyway, thank you for listening to me.
Hi, Sophie. Thanks a lot for this remarkable presentation. Can you please spell that? Can you please try it?
Oh God.
Yes, yes.
I maneuvered myself into this situation, right? So
Yeah.
I know it's not the j sound because that's without the little squiggly thing underneath, right?
Like ch.
Chalk?
Yes.
Teşekkürler.
Yes.
Yay! I learned something new today.
Yes.
Hang on, let me stop my screen sharing. How do I do this?
Okay.
There it is.
So, Sophie, thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me.
Beautiful and important presentation and the topic itself. Because all the time we are focusing on like technical stuff and business, yet we all know the health is more important thing of all, especially the mental one for sure. Also, I'd like to thank you for waiting until this time and contributing to the other sessions as well. It was lovely.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, it was lovely to feel your presence here throughout the event. And there is one thing that matters for us and makes you very special and unique for the conference is you are actually the only woman making a keynote speech here in Live2Test. And that's why the stars take the stage at last.
That's very kind of you to say.
I hope you had a great time with us and hope to see you in the upcoming.
I did, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.